If you've been blind from birth, how would you describe color? Alex O'Connor just put up a video with Tommy Edison, a man who's been blind since birth, and he asked him this exact question. Here's what he said.
I must ask you to tell me basically everything that you know about color. I have to do it.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I know about color. Red is fire. Red is also, it's hot. And it's very eye-catching. I know that, for example, Coca-Cola, I think, is red, right? The bottle or the can of Coca-Cola is red.
Yeah.
Because Tommy has never actually seen color, all he can use to describe color is associations. But hold on. How would you describe color? If I asked you what is red, what would you say? I'll give you some time to think. Are you not drawn to the exact same language as Tommy? Red is danger, red is hot, red is fire. Nobody says red is light between 620 and 750 nanometers. Instead, you come up with a list of things you've associated with red over your lifetime. Or maybe you do try to get more physically precise. Maybe you say red is bright, red is eye-catching. But we can have dark red. Does dark red not count as red? And eye-catching compared to what? Red obviously stands out when compared with an ocean or when compared with a forest, which is, 90% of the planet. But if trees were red and the ocean was red, would red really be so eye-catching? Mars is full of red, but we don't usually think of Mars as an eye-catching planet. Eye-catching doesn't necessarily seem to be a property of red. It seems to be a property of the relationship between things that are red and things that aren't red. Your inability to describe what red really is isn't a lack of understanding, it's a reality of language. Tommy can't experience color, you can, but when you go to describe color, you end up working with the same tools he does. Associations. His blindness allows him to confront a reality between words and meanings that most of us never actually realize even exists. What's going on, guys? My name's Nick. I'm the creator of Lengualytics and a fluent speaker of the Spanish language. And in this video, I'm gonna argue that Tommy's answer reveals a flaw in how most people think language works. Why does Tommy answer the question in such a similar way to how we do, even though he can't see color? It's because the actual visual experience of red, or the redness of red, is a very small part of what the word red actually carries. Our brain does a really bad job of separating things that are red from the visual experience of the color itself. Fire, heat, the woman in the red dress, bright red stripes on a venomous snake. After a lifetime of associations, these ideas get bundled and packaged into the word red itself. So when we see red, we get danger, we get sex, we get lust, we get rage, we get embarrassment. And this doesn't just happen with colors. The mistake most language learners make when they start out is they tend to believe that words are just labels that point to singular concepts. But words are not simply clean pointers to concepts. The word red doesn't simply point to the visual experience of red, as shown by how we describe it. Seeing red means getting furious. Red-faced means becoming embarrassed. She turned red with embarrassment. The word red isn't just indirectly associated with these things, it's tightly coupled with them through the language. There's also red alert and being in the red. Those things borrow red's connotation of danger. So when an English speaker hears she turned red with blank, because of word associations, we know what emotions are likely to finish that sentence. What this means is it doesn't make sense to think of a word as a simple label pointing to a concept. It makes much more sense to think of red as a collection of associations that tie into thousands of other concepts. And those concepts tie into tens of thousands of more concepts. If I say the word alarm, what color do you picture? We don't learn words by connecting them to a discrete handful of concepts. We learn them by connecting them to large networks of associations. Each word becomes a dense collection of associations constructed by everything else it's ever appeared around. When we hear a word in context, we can think of all that context pouring into that word. The words around it pour into the word, what you're seeing pours into the word, all your senses pour in, the story you're following pours in, the gender of the speaker, the age of the speaker, a fire hose of implicit information grafting that word into a larger network of meaning. But someone might say, okay, well, meaning is built from associations, fine. But why don't we just study those associations? Why don't we just find everything a word is associated with, understand them, and therefore understand the word without having to listen to tons and tons and tons of the language? In the interview, Alex actually actually brings up a thought experiment that kind of begs that question.
To imagine somebody who spends their entire life not experiencing color. It's called Mary's room. It's this idea of Mary being in a room and it's all black and white. There's no color, basically. And learns everything there is to learn about color. Reads everything there is to read, learns about the science of the eye, learns about neuroscience, and learns everything that even in principle it would be possible to ever learn about color. At the end of her life, she steps outside and she looks up and she sees blue for the first time. Has she learned something new?
Most people's instinct is yes, she learned something new. But how is that possible if she already knows every fact? Isn't that a contradiction? I'm gonna hold my answer until later. Let's do the same thought experiment, but let's make Mary a person trying to learn Spanish. Imagine she's memorized every Spanish word and its direct English translation, every grammar rule, every conjugation. She has a dictionary that can pronounce any word she looks up, so she knows exactly how each one sounds in isolation. She's learned everything a textbook and a pronunciation guide could possibly contain, but she has never heard a single sentence spoken by a real person. She leaves the room and encounters a native Spanish speaker talking at full speed. Can she understand that speech? I think a lot of people are drawn to the same conclusion of the original thought experiment, that even after understanding every single Spanish fact, Mary is still going to be missing something and therefore won't be able to understand the full-speed native speaker. But then what is Mary missing? If she has every single possible fact, what could possibly be keeping her from understanding real native Spanish? The answer here is the exact answer I'd give to the original Mary's room problem. There are simply two different types of knowledge. When Mary sees red for the first time, her physical eye is seeing light refract a certain way that she's never seen before. That is new knowledge. The problem is, seeing red is not rational. It's not something that can be learned from studying facts. It's not something that can be written down. It's learned from having an experience. Just like Mary can't reason herself to what red looks like, she can't study herself to real-time comprehension of a language. The second a native speaker opens their mouth, Mary's gigantic catalog of facts is essentially offline. What she needed wasn't more information about Spanish, it was a trained system that had heard thousands of hours of the language operating in real, authentic contexts. In other words, Mary was missing a skill or an ability as opposed to some extra piece of rational knowledge. Real-time comprehension of language is much more like hitting a baseball or trying to get up on water skis. It's something that's outside of complete rational explanation. It's something your brain needs experience trying to do. Most people will agree. They'll say,
okay, that's true. Language can't be fully explained to you. It has to be something you experience.
But then they'll say,
well, we just have to drill rational knowledge until it's implicit. The issue is that Mary didn't just need facts, she needed lightning fast recall speed. She needed to drill her knowledge.
But that's just not what empirical knowledge feels like. Think about how you know when something sounds wrong in English. You don't need to reach for a rule you've memorized. In fact, you probably don't know almost any grammar rules in your native language. Instead, you just feel the error when somebody makes a grammar mistake in English. You can feel the error before you even consciously engage with it. It doesn't feel like retrieval at all, it just feels like nothing. Contrast that with recalling a fact, even with extremely fast recall. What's the capital of your home state? There seems to be a moment of reaching. Your conscious mind still seems to have a role. Implicit language knowledge just doesn't have that, and drilling facts faster doesn't magically remove the structural problem. When I'm listening to Spanish as a fluent speaker, or even before I became fluent, it always has felt like I'm listening just like I listen to my native language. Of course, there's always been words I don't recognize and concepts that are fuzzy, but it's never ever felt like a recall exercise. Understanding the answer to the Mary's room philosophical problem puts you ahead of 99% of people who are trying to learn a language. Because if you understand that there are simply two types of knowledge, then you realize you don't need to be able to rationally articulate everything that you're learning when you're listening to a language. Thinking that everything you get out of listening to a language you should be able to explain and articulate cuts off 95% of what learning a language actually is. Language learning is not a database of rules and translations plus fast recall speed. Language learning is building a deeply embedded relational model of the language by unconsciously grafting in millions of implicit associations. The reality is, most people overestimate the extent of their rational knowledge. Psychologists call this the illusion of explanatory depth. It's the consistent human tendency to believe we understand things far more deeply than we actually do until we're forced to explain them. It's exactly what we see when we try to define the color red. We come to the problem thinking we understand color perfectly, but then when we try to explain, we realize how limited our understanding is. Your conception of what color is breaks down immediately when you're asked questions like, well, how do you know a shade of red that you've never seen before is actually red? How would you explain red to someone who can't see? Why is red eye-catching? Your native language is the most extreme example of this illusion that exists. You've used it every day of your life. You're more confident in your understanding of it than almost anything else on the planet. Yet almost all of us understand basically nothing about how it actually works. We think words are simple labels of concepts and grammar is just how we order them, and that's how we understand and that's how we speak. But then when you bring that understanding to your second language, you quickly realize that's just not how language works. Tommy forces us to notice the limits of rational knowledge precisely because he never had the ability to fool himself into believing he understood color. He has never seen red, so when he describes red, all he has is associations. But it turns out that's basically all we have as well. If you're new to language learning, you're probably thinking that what I'm saying is the only way to understand a language is by doing immersion, and that's part of the story, but it's not really the full story. If you'd like to go deeper into the best method to obtain a native-like understanding of a language, I recommend checking out this video right here. Just an overview of the method I recommend. I will see you there.